That's right. Did you know that? We're badly needed and long overdue. A
We
controversial
are.
podcast about Colorado Springs. And it's controversial, Emily,
Hmm.
because it makes sense. I'm your host, Nick Craven, joining to my virtual left. And you're right, if you're watching the YouTube version, the video version, which you probably should, is my
Yeah.
co-host, researcher, and queen TikToker, Emily Lewis. How are you doing? Welcome.
I'm here.
Yes. Yes, you made it.
It's
You dragged yourself to be here this
I
morning.
did. I did. I'm just as a heads up. I'm not on my game today at all.
Oh,
It was a long night. It was
yeah.
a long night, and I have to remember that I'm not 30 anymore and probably should be in bed at 10:30 and not leaving the house to go out at 10:30.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
So,
I'm not young. I'm a youngin. I love the people who are like, "Oh, but you're so young." I'm like, this is the point in my life where I should be buying a Corvette. That's where I was.
no, you don't
This
do that
has-
until you hit 50. That's your
no,
midlife crisis car.
no, that's your post midlife crisis. That's
Mm-mm.
when you've really got to anyway.
No, no,
Uh
no. We will argue about that.
Speaking of arguments, we were arguing with Rob Rogers the whole time he was on our. I'm just kidding. We had a great interview with Rob Rogers,
We did. We had a fantastic interview. I
candidate
really.
HD Colorado House District 14 on the north end.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone we're talking to is on the north end.
So far, we're trying to get people
Yeah.
in and around. So you guys stay tuned.
Mm-hmm. See what?
Same bat time, same bat channel. Actually, same badly needed time, same badly needed channel. As we're trying to get as many people in here as
Mhm.
possible. There's only
Oh,
so
yeah.
many weeks now
Yep.
ahead of the election.
Leading up to election. And we will. Something we talked about today, off camera, is starting to talk to people after the big scary on November 8th as well.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, absolutely. So we had a really nice. It's a nice long. We dig real deep into
Oh, yeah.
where Rob's from, what he wants to do. We touch
they
on
talk.
TikTok and Seven Mountains and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Nick and Rob get to have a lovely conversation about taxes.
Metropolitan tax districts. Absolutely, that's your favorite.
It You can tell.
Yeah.
You can absolutely tell. As you guys are talking about it, you can see how enthralled I am
Yes, you
about
are.
the conversation.
You're so well. So with all that said, let's dive in and
Let's do it.
let's get into it. Rob Rogers, candidate, Democrat, Colorado House District 14. Let's go!
Yay!
Rob Rogers, I want to welcome you to this little show that we make in Colorado Springs. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic.
I love it. It's like straight to the point. That's We're getting close to that election thing.
I'm good. I mean, the thing people don't prepare you for when you're running for office is that you're going to be like tired all the time.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm having fun.
Yeah, I imagine you have a lot of obligations. You're skipping around a lot of places. We're getting closer. I don't know if you know this, but there's an election coming up, and as
you
a
know what?
candidate, you have to It seems like it's a big deal, and so there's a lot of obligations you have to do and do things at the last minute. It seems like you're in that.
Squarely in that, yes.
Okay.
And that's another one of the things they don't prepare you for too. It's there's no. It's like exponential growth, right? It's not linear. It's not like you're busy. At a constant rate. It just keeps on getting ramped up and more busy, more and more meetings, more and more events, more and more phone calls. It's just it just escalates.
So it's like slowly and then all at once.
Yeah, it there's a lot of stuff that happens at like the very beginning when you're trying to get your commit. And this is the first time I've done this, so a lot of this was like new for me. But you got to get your committee set up and all the foundational stuff like set up at the very beginning, which was all happening back in February, and then it just escalates from there. Your schedule just gets busier and busier and busier as time goes on.
Yeah, you get that logarithmic scale in there. You go 10, 100, 1,000. You just like, ah! Yeah. I haven't run for anything before. I didn't even run. I had planned, Rob, I will have you know, that I had planned to run for student body president at one point. And then when the time came, I was like, the fuck, why would I do that? That's stupid. I'm not one of the popular kids. No one knows who I am. I kind of had a platform, but anyway. Yeah, so, Rob, why are you running for House District 14?
My story in general is because
I mean, we could dig into your story. Don't worry.
I've heard. Yeah, I've heard from, and I'm around like all the other candidates because we all the El Paso County candidates end up in like in the same place at the same time. So I've heard all their stories like so many times, and they're all pretty similar from my perspective. There's some kind of moment where the straw, that broke that camel's back. We finally got tired of it, and it was the same thing with me. And there's a direct line with what happened in the El Paso County school boards last year. And me running for office now. And I've been dabbling and I've done some citizen lobbying. A lot of like my political activity has been activism up until recently. But I had an idea, I kind of knew how it worked. I did hundreds of hours of volunteering during Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016 when I was still in Northern Virginia. And so I've been on the fringes of it, for a while. But then whenever all the dark money got dumped into the school board races last year, and you're looking around for some help with this, I'm just a parent at that point, and I'm watching like what's going on, and you need some help at that point. And you would think that, you'd be able to reach out to your state representative. Maybe that'd be a good person who might be able to help you or provide some advice. Or, maybe write a bill or something to prevent this kind of thing from happening, in the future. And then when you're finding out that your representative doesn't really talk to anybody who's not a member of their party, I remember the moments like I can do better than this. I can be better than this. And so there was my moment.
Yeah, I love talking about myself whenever I can, but I used to live up in Briargate, and I got activated in 2016 thanks to Bernie and that. So I got really interested in like the summer of 2016. And then that became Dan Nordberg versus Chris Walters, and he was kind of a last minute thing. So at a point I had considered running up there before redistricting, but yeah, you're right. There is really just so much to starting it and procedure and, getting everything right. And I learned a lot about the party and the process along the way. When did you move out here to Colorado Springs?
June of 2018, but after I got out of the Air Force, I started working for a startup that was based in Colorado Springs, and that was in 2001. So I had been traveling out here 5 or 6 times a year for 20 years before we decided to move from DC out here.
So you're getting used to you were kind of already familiar, or at least coming to grips with, this is a conservative city, this is a conservative area. These are the candidates that are gonna but it sounds like the walled garden approach that they have was relatively new then. Like we have all these representatives, but they're only useful to a couple of people who live here.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I mean, in coming from like the East Coast, it's you don't really have there's not necessarily like areas. I mean, yes, there are conservative areas even like around Northern Virginia, but it wasn't like as there wasn't so much of a separation there. I mean, to the point where you can't even get a phone call returned.
Right.
It might not be a pleasant conversation necessarily. You're going to have some disagreements, but they'd at least talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and there would at least be communication as a good representative should do. So let's go back in time there. Where did you grow up? Was it the DC area or?
No. I grew up in South Arkansas.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. So you're just down the street
This,
from Ryan then.
yeah, this is Arkansas weekend.
Yeah.
yeah, I think Brian's from Bryant, and I grew up in a little town called Smackover.
That is an Arkansas name right there.
Yeah.
It's how it's a great example about how like Americans will always screw up, foreign languages.
Uh-huh.
It's a derivative of a French word, sumac,
Okay.
a water plant, and that's in the Washtenaw River, river bottoms in South Arkansas. So there's a lot of water plants and that kind of stuff. So I can imagine, somebody talking about, hey, just go over to that sumac over there and set up the town.
Mm.
It became like smack over.
Oh, yeah, like flutterbys and butterflies and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Arkansas. What was that? I can imagine. But what was that climate like politically, or even for you as like your family? Were you a left-leaning, bleeding heart liberal from a young age, or is that something you had to come into?
It's something that I grew into. I mean, like anybody else. I mean, I'm not any different. Nobody else is any different. Whenever you're a kid, your political leanings are gonna look a whole lot like your parents.
Right.
And my grandparents raised me from 2 to 14, and that was they are or were. My grandfather's retired now, but he was a Southern Baptist pastor and a preacher's wife. So that was I still kind of consider them my parents.
Mm-hmm.
They raised me during those times. So I went to private Christian schools until I was 14. Started public school as a sophomore. Whenever I was 14, that was interesting.
Getting into the public schooling system.
Yeah.
Oh, that had to have been a shock to the system.
At 14, and I skipped kindergarten because I could already read. So I went into my sophomore year, my first year in public school, 14 as a sophomore when everybody else was like 16. So that made it like even worse.
Here's this kid trying to be in our class with us.
Yeah. I mean, and a kid, I mean, who quite honestly, and this isn't necessarily criticism, it's just the reality, that just was not prepared, for that non-sheltered world.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was that was hard. I still remember that as some like my hardest years. But hey, it's the things that make us who we are.
Right.
But I don't know if I'm giving you like a good enough a picture here of like what that was like. It was I was very, very indoctrinated, very embedded into the evangelical side of Christianity.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
For a while, which makes my current life that much more ironic.
Yeah, I was gonna say I kind of relate because at 13 we moved out here from Colorado and I'd been living on base housing my entire life up to that point. So we got we had to settle in civilian neighborhood because the wait for housing on Peterson was 3 years long. So here I was in this kind of, I don't know, like an enclave or so of military kids who understood what military life was. And then you had to deal with these secular kids who were riding skateboards and listening to bad music. And it's like, what is going on? And of course, it's right as puberty is starting. So it's that much more awkward to try and make friends. And were you able to maintain friendships coming out of Christian schools?
I mean, not really. I mean, I knew some of them. I mean, it was like there was this collection of like parents who would just rotate through like the private Christian schools that would get set up in these churches like in the area for a while. So we've all been going to school with each other and knew each other, since, first, like second grade. And then one school would like shut down for like whatever reason. And then someone else would build another one, in a different church, and we'd all go over there. There were some of them that ended up going to the same public school as well. But, the combination of being in that world, and I'm not really in that world anymore.
Yeah.
With leaving Arkansas and joining the Air Force,
Mhm.
my my world just got my worldview, my world just got so much bigger as a result of those things. So if you're still embedded in that world and you're still living in Arkansas, then you know you lose things to talk about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. So
Yeah.
you got into was it like straight out of high school into the Air Force? Was that a plan or
Yeah, I mean, I always knew that I wanted to be in the Air Force because I knew my grandfather was in the Air Force and he served in the Air Force in the Korean War.
Mhm.
And that was something I always had in my mind that I wanted to do. And I turned 18 in basic training.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
as soon as well, I mean, I graduated high school at 17, but that was like in June. And then I was in delayed enlistment until the next February. And then I turned 18 in basic training. So I wanted out of Arkansas
Yeah.
for a lot of different reasons, and so I go to basic training, and I got out of Arkansas because they sent me to Alaska.
Oh my
Um,
God.
Ooh.
my first assignment that was up there.
Yeah, but you got to go to San Antonio first, which is, just down the street before they send you out.
Yeah, which I mean, I think you only get to see like San Antonio like one day that you're there.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
my dad was there in '82, and he said that he watched a guy die on this track. He was from Michigan, and had overexerted himself and just died. And like that seemed to, I don't know, he seemed kind of nonplussed about it, but I think, that's not something you usually see in the world as it happens.
Yeah.
not to discount, someone dying, but if someone's dying in basic training, in Air Force basic training, there's something else going on.
They probably should have just stayed home.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Well, sometimes you can make it pretty far through there before they're like, "Oh, here's a thing that was on a psychiatric evaluation," that maybe we looked over. You mentioned your grandfather had served, and I see the correlation there between here is this Christian Arkansas upbringing, and then also get into the Air Force or get into the military, because they both kind of present that same kind of tribalism of like, you do it because your ancestors did it, and you did it because like that's what's expected of you to do, and this is what it is to be a patriot and to be honored in this country, to be honorable is to follow in these things that are deeply embedded in you from a young age. Did you get a feeling for that?
Get a feeling like for the similarities between.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it was like, I mean, there's definitely the tribalism. I mean, you get to like a new unit in the Air Force, and you've immediately got, a whole new number of friends, that will do anything for you, which is, I mean, that's, I'm not gonna lie, that's a nice feeling.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of like the same thing in the evangelical circles in the South, as long as your skin color is the right one.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say too. Excuse me. Rob is one of the few people that we've spoken with that is running for things that is of my generation. So I can, the looking at it from Nick's young baby eyes, the early 90s were a completely different kind of time. We didn't really have that even in the South, because I was in the South, I was in Texas in the early 90s. We didn't really have that kind of blind patriotism that you wound up with after 9/11.
Yeah.
You didn't really have that. So it was a different, again, being in Texas in the early 90s and then coming back to Colorado Springs with all the military, it was not what it is now. And it's and that's, an outsider looking in, but again, spending time here with all the, you know, and that was my dateable time. So
That was that window.
you know, yeah, the pool was 99% military, just pick a base.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like I said, the early 90s was a completely different time than it was, 10 years later.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
What was your MMOS?
I was a 1 Charlie 5. That's aerospace control and warning.
Oh,
And that was a little bit of a connection to Colorado Springs there with NORAD being headquartered here. So I went to a NORAD facility in Alaska for the first time. So I was watching radars, and a lot of the job is it's kind of the opposite of air traffic control. So air traffic controllers keep planes apart for safety reasons, and weapons controllers are some of the things that I was doing. We put planes together for intercepts. So we were doing real intercepts against real Russian aircraft when I was up in Alaska for a lot of the time that I was up there.
did you ever play the game DEF CON?
I didn't, but I know you're talking about.
Yeah, because that's it. There's, if you don't know, DEF CON is a game. It looks like war games with that with the screens at NORAD lighting up with the arcs of nuclear missiles and stuff like that. But you have all the stages ahead of that as the threat escalates, where you're laying down radar stations and sending out planes to intercept missiles as they come in and stuff like that. What was it about? I guess maybe nuclear deterrence or missile defense that really got you into that.
I wanted to go. That wasn't like a conscious decision.
Oh, okay.
You don't get like nearly as many like conscious decisions in the military as the recruiters will allow you to believe.
Yeah.
But, so I intended to be an air traffic controller. That's what I wanted to go in for, and they didn't have. It's like your timing of like what job you get in the military has to line up with when tech school classes start, and that kind of thing, and when you go to basic training. And my recruiter told me that the best way of trying to do that would be to go in open general. So
no.
I went in open general, and they did have spots that were open for air traffic control school at Keesler Air Force Base. It's where that would have been.
Yeah.
And I failed you have to have a flight physical for that job. And I failed the flight physical because my hemoglobin count, my iron count in my blood was too low.
Okay. Yeah. So
because I failed the physical, the guy who's picking the job is like, hey, this sounds pretty similar. It doesn't require a flight physical. And that was a 1 Charlie 5 aerospace control and warning. And, he didn't know what he's talking about because, like I just described, it's actually the opposite.
Exact opposite of the thing you wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned Keesler because that's where my dad trained. He was in SATCOM, telecommunications, stuff like that. So we went to Germany and Europe a lot, and we were doing the actual, like, quarter-inch jacks to, like, do switchboards and stuff like that to connect calls and stuff like that. And then before he got out, he was down at Schriever doing SATCOM. And stuff like that. He was a part of SAC when that was still a thing, and we were based out of Omaha. So, but he wanted to fly helicopters, and because of his vision, or at least the standards for vision at that time, he couldn't. But also they revised it not long afterward, and he had a kind of thing on his shoulder about that for a while. So where did you end up moving around? Did you get to see cool places? Was there fun spots you got to go to?
Yeah, so I was up in Anchorage for 4 years, and this is the things that happen in the military. So I had orders to Panama, and I was going to be going to Howard Air Force Base in Panama, and there's a counter narcotic radar facility that was down there, and around like the same time. I had found out about a special duty assignment at Naval Air Station Key West that I could apply for. I was in a long TDY in Florida during this period, and whenever I came back, I had 3 sets of orders. I had one sending me to Panama, which I wanted to go to, And then I had another one that was canceling those orders. And then I had another one that was giving me the special duty assignment at NAS Key West. So I went from Alaska to Key West back to back.
Oh, okay.
And I really enjoyed Key West. I've spent a lot of time down there across my career. And then my last assignment was in Utah, at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. And that was probably like the hardest one for a lot of different reasons. Utah is very sterile, in case you didn't know.
Yes.
I've been to their airport once.
I did learn to snowboard in Utah, and that was a good part of Utah.
Oh, yeah. I've driven through Utah a number of times going to Los Angeles, but yeah, I've not experienced the culture of Utah at all. So how did you end up in DC then?
So in 2000, it was December 2000. I decided that I needed to get out of the Air Force. I had a security clearance. I knew what a computer was. That opened up some possibilities. I mean, I've had a computer since I was 9. My grandparents somehow had the foresight to know that was going to be important. I got an Apple IIc whenever I was 9 years old. So I've had it for a while. Anyway, I
5 1/4 floppies.
Five and a quarter floppy, and had a whole 128K of RAM.
Heck yeah. Yeah, that's all you'll ever need.
Yeah, all you ever need.
Yeah.
But looking around at job opportunities, and then found I found the job that I started with, the startup that I mentioned. It was based in Colorado Springs. I flew over the Rockies from Salt Lake City to come into Colorado Springs to interview for that job in December 2000. And the job was back in Key West. That's how I found it. So I went back to Key West as a contractor, working for the company here. And then I was down there for another 4 years. I lived in Key West for 7 years total. And I wasn't going to be able to do anything else with my career down in Key West. And there was a need for, project managers and that kind of stuff with the same company up in DC. So I moved up there in 2005. So I was in the DC area for 13 years total.
That's quite a span. I've been there once. It's a fun area. I'd love to go back as a tourist. I don't know if I'd live there. Same thing with LA. I don't know.
I don't know. I loved DC.
Seems like there's a lot of culture.
Yeah. I wanted to just never come back, like ever.
And there's not any other place where you can kind of walk up like on a moment's notice and walk into a big marble building and there's the freaking Constitution. Like,
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
You can't do that kind of thing like anywhere else, or you're walking around, on the east side of like the Capitol and, watch Matt Gaetz trip over a divider rope. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was there, I just noticed the density. There's just a power there that's very extrinsic. Just the density of the buildings. You're up like 6 stories around every single block, except where you have the mall. And there's people everywhere. And everything, like, people don't realize how small DC is because it was built when people used to walk everywhere. So, like, you could fit, like, the capital of DC in, like, almost downtown Colorado Springs. It's really trippy. Just how small that area is, but it's so dense, and like I said, there's just so much energy and history.
Yeah, the energy is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So now I'm jealous that you got to live there, just so you know.
It loses its luster after a little while. I mean, that was actually one of the reasons that we had a list. There's about 5 different reasons, why we finally moved to Colorado Springs after all the opportunities that I had. And one of the top reasons is traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Being able, I don't work from an office anymore after COVID. But whenever I was going to the office here, I live about 13 miles from my office. And it would take me about 15 minutes to get there. And I remember like the first morning that I was here, driving into the office, like, holy crap, this is amazing.
The interstate. Wow. Weird.
And it's like, there's no traffic on it, that kind of stuff. And so like here you can kind of like plan 15, 20 minutes anywhere you have to go. If you're in DC, you have to plan an hour to an hour and 15 minutes wherever you have to go. And you waste so much time in a car there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the roads make no sense. None. No sense.
It's like they weren't made for cars or something.
Right?
Something weird.
Well,
like,
I mean, if you're talking about like in DC, I think the guy, I'm probably not pronouncing this way, because remember I'm from Arkansas. So.
Smack over.
L'Enfant. There's a plaza and a metro station there. It's like named after, he was the designer of DC, and he did all that on purpose to be intimidating for foreign visitors.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it's intimidating to your run of the mill human just trying to find a grocery store.
Yeah. So when did your politics start to change? Obviously you're in the Air Force there. You're going into private industry. We're still kind of related to the Air Force and that. And then you're coming out to Colorado Springs. So when are you personally like taking stock and be like, hey man, maybe things are different than I thought?
So the last Republican that I voted for was George Bush Sr.
Oh, okay.
And after that, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that like my politics like started changing. It's that was during the time whenever I was like really starting to learn about some of the detriments of our two-party system, and starting to learn more about the coalition politics that happen with parliamentary systems in like other countries. And I started like thinking, I started supporting like more third party candidates like during that time, trying to change something basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still like, conservative leaning. I mean, it's like, in a lot of, especially like in Arkansas, where I grew up, it's a constant reinforcement of all you have to do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you can have the American dream. And as I was going out into the world, I was starting to get exposed, to a lot more types of people, a lot more cultures, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's you start realizing that that's not necessarily the case. And then you start realizing and you start thinking about, well, why would this particular aspect be emphasized so heavily? Why is it that so many people are emphasizing this concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and you can have the American dream? You can make it too. Why is everyone emphasizing that so much? And then you start realizing who that benefits. And that doesn't really, that concept, that way of thinking doesn't really benefit anyone. It doesn't really benefit any one person. It really benefits corporations.
Right.
So I don't know. It was a long series of starting to put puzzle pieces together. And then in 2000, starting like in 2006 and leading up to 2008 when President Obama was elected, and you really start to see the racism that
out
was
loud.
Still like embedded in the country, but it just been like quiet for a while, and all of that to come roaring back was also very validating from some of the things that had already been piecing together, like myself. And I don't know, it was a process. And then when you start to understand, concepts of intersectionalism, and you start to realize that that all marginalized people have something in common. And I don't know, it was a long and deep and very philosophical deconstruction of what I'd been taught.
I can understand that. And you're growing up in an evangelical house as well, where it's like, this is the way things are. This is the way they have been for thousands of years before you were even born. There's a divinity to it all. So it's not just that you're pulling up here by your bootstraps. It's like there's a religious component to it, where if you fall out of that, if you start doubting this stuff that you were raised in, that's like an affront to God, or at least it was in my case. So when I started to have those thought experiments of why is this so weird and perversely American, then it's like, oh God, what if I go to hell for eternity after this because I thought of something different? And I don't know if you have that fun experience hand in hand with exploring your political views.
Well, that's kind of what Emily was talking about earlier, where like if she and I are like similar age, then we watch the transformation.
Oh yeah.
From where religion and politics really didn't have a lot to do with each other. That's the whole that abortion was invented as a wedge issue, was to get more evangelicals to vote. I mean, that's why this guy named Paul Weyrich, who was involved in the creation of the Heritage Foundation, that's why he invented it specifically to tap into that voting block. So we saw the transformation. See, I didn't grow up with Fox News. That's relatively low, and Emily probably didn't either.
Nope.
So we saw the transformation, and then Nick, you experienced it. You got that, we experienced the transformation from fairly good separation of church and state. Politics and religion didn't really mix all that much, to Christian nationalism and the very, very deliberate transformation that happened over that. So I don't ever remember that growing up that, I got to vote for like Ronald Reagan, or I got to vote for George Bush before religious reasons.
Yeah.
Much more of a conservative principles kind of reason. But I mean, Arkansas was also like one of the last states. It wasn't until 2012 that the last legislative body in Arkansas was flipped to Republican. It was the last state after Reconstruction to flip to Republicans. And there's a lot of really strong Democrats, a lot of Democratic history in Arkansas.
Yeah, and people don't understand that like party switch that happened. The whole naming, all that. So tell us about House District 14. That's a tough district for a Democrat up there. And we were talking with Ryan Lucas the other day, and one of the big priorities and talking points is all of that development that's happening up there. I know you probably have Whataburger or In-N-Out every single day while you bounce by the Shields on your way to watch a movie at the Icon Cinema. And all that. I'm sure that's totally a Rob Rogers move, but developers seem to have kind of free leash up there to do whatever they want, and the city is kind of like, yeah, sure, why not?
Real quick, I'm still here. I just got to step away for a second. I got to deal with the dog thing.
Yeah, fine. You got it. No problem.
For the record, I'm a Sonic guy.
Oh,
Right.
Not Whataburger. I still have not really seen. I do not understand like why anybody would be waiting, still, in those long lines for In-N-Out. It's
nostalgia.
It's good, but it's not all that.
I'll inject a hot take. So in Phoenix, we had Whataburger and In-N-Out, and I was there for a couple years. In-N-Out, not very good, and Whataburger, don't really care for it. So I understand there's a reputation, but no, I don't get it at all. Anyway, sorry.
Everybody's like seeing what's happened in the northeast part of Colorado Springs. I remember whenever I was coming out here, first, and I had some coworkers that lived, in Pine Creek, right off of Briargate, and Briargate ended at Union for a long time, and it wasn't anything but, cow pastures, past that. Now it's relatively not that long ago. Now it's just full of houses and that kind of thing. I live in Wolf Ranch. So I live in one of those old cow pastures.
Yeah, everything beyond Powers there is so that Target, even though that Target's like 10, 15 years old, it's like that just came up yesterday. It feels like it.
And I mean, I'm not a construction developer, so I'm speaking a little bit, like out of my lane, but we all know like what's going on in Colorado Springs, and there's Colorado Springs is likely going to be the largest city in the United States in the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, we're going to continue to experience this accelerated exponential growth. And so because of that exponential growth that's like going on, in addition to the influence that the developer community that basically controls, the city council and the county commission, I mean, they're making their money. I mean, it's exactly what you would expect whenever, that type of a community with those kind of interests, have control over decisions in the county and the city. That shouldn't really be surprising to anybody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's also a lot of not in my backyard, type of mentality that's going on too.
The NIMBYism.
Yeah. And while I get it, I mean, nobody wants their Mountain View blocked by an apartment complex.
Yeah.
Nobody if they're living in their single family homes, nobody wants, their townhouses, like sitting next door to them too. And there's a lot of concerns and worry, about what kind of environment that's going to create. And so these interests are like competing with each other, right? Except that one side has power and one side doesn't.
Yeah.
And I've talked with a lot of people about this, like recently, that the growth, the exponential growth, it's inevitable. We're not going to change it. That it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And these people have to have somewhere to live, and these people have to have somewhere to work, and they have to have somewhere to play. And it's not always going to be ideal decisions that are made to support that type of thing that's happening. And the people who can control the city council and county commission, they are there looking at these opportunities for how they can continue to fulfill their objectives.
Yeah.
And so the general public, though, has to become more involved with the shaping of this growth that is inevitable. It can't be like an all or nothing thing. There have to be, I mean, sure. Okay. We don't want like an apartment complex here in this particular neighborhood. Okay. We have to have it. So where are we going to put it?
Yeah.
It's in there has to be much more of a productive conversation that's like going on about these things. And people also have to, they have to look at how they're voting at the same time.
Right.
Because the way that voting patterns have happened over the last 20, 30 years don't line up with what their concerns are now. Am I making sense with this?
Yeah.
They're concerned about like the growth and how this is being handled, but the way that they're voting doesn't really line up with things that are going to result in productive solutions.
It's a thing down here in Colorado Springs where we vote against the ounce of prevention, but then we have to eat down the pound of cure, 10, 20 years down the road, which doesn't make any sense. And it is the opposite of conservatism, especially if you're one of those people who bangs their fists about fiscal conservatism. It doesn't make much sense. Like, we wouldn't need to see if the general fund just addressed road repairs long time ago. We wouldn't need to worry about stormwater if we just maintained them for years and years and years. And I see on the north end, the trips that I do get to make up there, it is so disconnected. Like, every place it's like a Citadel Mall on every corner. Like, there's a sea of parking lot and then a structure, and you can't walk anywhere. Everything is a mile from everything else. And I know that down the road, there are going to be things that come of that, especially when so many houses are being built up there too.
Yep.
I'm thinking like most recently, there's all of like these disconnected communities, that are being built, and none of them really have any food or services like within them. You do have to travel outside of them in order to get, to those particular like services or buy food and that kind of thing. So all of this is like going on, and some of that I believe is a side effect of how heavily this particular area in Colorado in general have leveraged metro districts, and that's kind of been done like out of necessity because of Tabor restrictions. So it's all like this snowballing effect that's like happening. So you see like all this disconnected stuff that's like going on, and I mean and they are really disconnected. I mean, a metro district is a quasi government organization that even has the ability of imposing taxes.
Right.
It kind of is by design. Then I start hearing about and doing more reading about the Banning Lewis Ranch expansion that's going on. I mean, Banning Lewis Ranch is going to be massive.
It is. Yeah.
Massive. Yep. And I don't think anybody like really realizes. And I'm sitting here looking at this, and there's all of like these disconnected communities that are being built in between. Banning Lewis Ranch was going to be a massive, it's going to be a city in and of itself. in between that, in the interstate, is all of these little disconnected communities and all of this transportation infrastructure that has been built for cars right now, and not mass transit, and not being built for the amount of cars that are going to be on those roads in the next 10 years, 15 years, or something like that.
Yep.
Right.
I'm just sitting here thinking about what a nightmare that's eventually going to be for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna suck.
And
It's gonna suck so much.
And that's even with those major, like, 6-lane arterials going up there, Voyager, Interquest, you know, just crisscrossing up there, Northgate, stuff like that. Like, it's gonna become a nightmare because everyone has to leave their residential bronchial to accomplish anything. And then that's gonna tax the infrastructure. We could talk about infrastructure all day, but what are some other issues? We didn't even get to talk about metropolitan tax districts when we had Ryan on. Emily was like, I'm gonna fall asleep. Say
Yeah,
la
it's like,
vie.
no, I'm leaving for that. That is going to be a Nick only show.
No, well, I can tell, but but yes, obviously, the north and northeast side, and increasingly, I'm gonna guess, like, the east side, as they fill in Banning Lewis, metropolitan tax districts, as the developers are passing on infrastructure spends to homeowners. That's a big heckin' deal. What do you hear about people getting this extra little line item on their bill that's like, we gotta pay this so that the developers can have their extra dollars? Or are they saying something else entirely?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was one of that's actually in my platform. It's one of and I get it, Emily. It's not controversial. It's not dramatic. It's very,
honestly,
it is very
even,
much. It's just go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say it's more than that. For myself personally, although I understand the need for these conversations, it numbers, I don't know what you're talking about, and it's just, it's easier for me to look at someone else that I trust and be like, okay, so tell me like I'm 5. Just break it down to the very smallest, why is this bad? Why is this good? Do not throw numbers at me or I will cry.
I think I can do that without. I think I can do that without mentioning any numbers.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Because metro districts are not inherently bad. They aren't, and there had to be a way to, because voters have to vote on tax increases and that kind of thing, like in the state because of Tabor, there has to be a way to raise the money to build out the infrastructure for new development. That's really what it comes down to. You have to build streets, you got to be able to lay pipe, you got to be able to run wire, right, to build these developments out. But that'd be really difficult for the city of Colorado Springs to absorb, because they'd have to get approval from the voters to raise taxes, to raise tax revenue in order to do these types of things. And there's not enough money available right now. That's the closest I'll get the numbers. Not enough money to do there. Okay. So, but they aren't inherently bad. My issue with them and living in one too has always been the transparency. And I'm not even accusing like developers of doing anything nefarious. I think that they are probably following the law. But whenever a new development, whenever Wolf Ranch was first being constructed, the Metro District was set up to support it. There was no one here. There was no residents here to serve on, because the Metro District boards are elected positions, but there's no one here to fill them. So the developers fill those board seats. And then as the residents start moving into the area, somewhere buried in all of like your closing documents and all the documents for you owning a house, it's going to explain a little bit more about what the Metro District is, but it's buried. You don't really know. You live in a Metro District, but you don't really know like what it is. You don't know how to exercise any influence on elected officials. You don't know anything about it. And then you can't find any information about it because there's no standards for how the information should be stored and provided to homeowners, like online or something like that. It's hard to find that. And then they do things like they schedule the board meetings at like 8 a.m. at a lawyer's office, like downtown
on a Tuesday.
It's probably convenient for them. So there's no way of getting involved or discovering how these hundreds of thousands of dollars are being used, what the priorities are. And these board seats continue to be filled by developers because no one really knows how to actually get involved. So the developers, as you would expect, I'm not criticizing them for this, they continue making decisions that are probably going to be in their best interest.
Yep.
Right? I can also understand too that at the beginning of a development, there's going to be a lot of things that homeowners don't understand have to be done. They don't want to spend any more of like the tax dollars building out roads that aren't going to benefit them. I get that, right? I mean, I can see like why that would be a problem. So my main issue like with it, and this is living in one and knowing how many there are like in the county, is the transparency. And I think that you should be provided a lot better information, lot simpler to understand information when you're contemplating buying. I think that whenever you close on a house in a metro district and there is a board filled seat, developer filled seat there, you should have the opportunity at that moment to nominate yourself and fill that seat as a homeowner. I think that there should be standards. This is 2022. Yep. Okay. We should have some standards for what a metro district website looks like. Right. I should be able to go to any metro district website in the state and have the same structure, be able to find the same information in the same place.
Yeah.
Board meetings should not be held at 8 a.m. in an office like downtown. They should be held at times that are convenient for homeowners, that are like working. It's those types of things that could be done in order to improve the situation itself.
Would you support an audit then of metro tax districts?
They do. There is a requirement to have an independent audit periodically. I don't know how often that is, but there is a requirement for that. Yes.
It doesn't seem like it's very toothy, but I guess that's kind of buried in the results and the whole kind of Byzantine process in which all of this happens. And I think you raise a really good point is if you want to get involved in something locally with like politics and that, there's a cliff you have to scale in order to understand what's going on, what the mechanisms are, where to find the info, and then ultimately what the information is, and then what you can actually do with that information once you have it. And so I get that even if it's in the best interest of everyone to get involved, there are times where it's like, unless you are truly out there and crusading to get this information, it's not available. You're not going to understand these complex systems that are governing how these things work unless you spend years diving in and being a fanboy and studious to get what's going on. And it seems like you had that kind of thing going on. Obviously, you've got a very tech-angled, sophisticated approach and background. But for the layman, it's like, how am I ever going to understand this, ever?
Yeah, that's just not... that's actually probably one of the things that has kept me from actively running for a thing. That and the fact that I think I'm probably better suited for, just roaming the streets with a pack of humans and screaming into the void.
There we go. I love that.
There's a place and there's a role for everybody. It doesn't have to be like elected office.
Yes.
It does have to be engaged.
100%.
Everybody needs to do something. Everybody needs to be involved somehow. Otherwise, in society doesn't work, like it's not a spectator sport,
Yeah, when you get these people that even now still talk about, well, I'm just not political. Do you know how privileged that is to not want to be involved in the decisions that are being made, even at the local level? Or, these are the decisions that are being made that affect the lives of yourself and everyone around you. How can you still sit there and be like, oh, no, it's fine. I mean, I don't really care for it. Nobody really cares for it. It's not, but it's something that has to be done. You have to pay attention. You have to pay attention.
Or the wrong people will.
Yes. And like I said, the privilege of not being political, I won't even lie. It makes me very ragey. very ragey.
That's a good word.
It's
Because it makes sense. It
Yes.
just does. What other
Yes.
issues up there are pressing in HD 14? Obviously, developers, but what else isn't happening? Or what are some issues in planks of your platform that only really the state can take care of?
They're the boundaries of Academy District 20, the school district, fall within falls entirely within the boundaries of House District 14. And public education is also a big emphasis of mine. I already mentioned that there was a direct line with what happened with the school boards in the area, and now public education is something that I've always valued.
But Rob, why are we going to put more money into schools when it's just going to go to sloshy middle management administrators that are not going to help the kids? We spend so much money on schools as is. How can you even fix that?
Who spends money on schools? Who?
School choice. That's what we need.
No.
Vouchers.
No.
Rob, vouchers.
No.
Vouchers.
No. I'm
I'm trolling you, but that's
I know.
definitely the.
I'm aware.
I got your tell, Nick.
So the first thing that all parents in El Paso County are experiencing is the impact of the shortage of teachers.
Yes.
We're bleeding teachers in all districts. None of the districts seem to be immune from this. Just massive amounts of vacancies in teachers, career teachers, career educators leaving. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. In my mind, number one, Colorado is now last of the 50 states in teacher pay for a lot of different reasons. So it's getting more and more difficult to attract people to replace those teachers who are leaving. We're also experiencing, they are also experiencing just a decline in the respect for the profession too, because of all the nonsense that gets created, and that unfortunately our elected school board members in all of our major districts are now promoting.
Yep.
Sure.
So I don't know that necessarily that we can do anything to help that other than, for all of the teachers, that are listening. I think I respect your profession just about more than any others, because you are the ones who teach our kids how to live productively in society, which is kind of important. So I appreciate teachers, and more of us who are talking about how we appreciate teachers and we understand what it is that they do for all of us, in that public service role, I think is important. But there's also some legislative solutions to that too. You have to go back in time to really realize how a lot of this started, all the way back into 2000, whenever Amendment 23 was passed, which was supposed to protect public education levels and protect it against inflation, population growth, and those kind of things. And then whenever the recession in 2008 happened, the legislators are having to look around for how are we going to overcome these tax revenue deficits for the state. And of course, all government seems to do, they turn and start looking at cutting education funding first.
Sure.
And that kind of went counter to the intent of Amendment 23, which the voters passed. And that's where a lot of people have probably heard of the BS factor, or budget stabilization factor, that allowed all of this to happen. That went all the way to the state Supreme Court, because the legislators were not acting within the intent of this amendment, and the state Supreme Court they were shown a specific phrase in Amendment 23, which places the emphasis on per pupil funding. And per pupil funding doesn't include everything that goes into funding a school system. So they were legally allowed to reference that particular metric and lower the amount of money that was being provided to the public education system. So that has resulted in, over time, because at the same time that they are decreasing the amount of public education funding, the state population is growing at an exponential rate as well. So we are almost at the same level of public education funding that we were back whenever Amendment 23 was passed. The situation is almost the same. It's gotten that bad over the period. Public education systems have been underfunded $10 billion.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can do some things. I mean, number one, to prevent that kind of situation from happening in the future. Because if there will be another recession, economics is cyclical. So we're going to have another recession. So when that happens again, look everywhere else for expenditure reductions before public education. At least prioritize it to keep it in place so we don't make the situation worse.
Oh yeah, because I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, even though I know it's not your, it's not your district, your area. Looking at both of my kids went to my youngest went to D11 all through school. And my oldest went to District 2 and then into District 11. And the difference between what it looked like when my now 30-year-old graduated high school and, what it looked like when my now 19-year-old finished school. The quality of teachers is and that's not to say that we're only getting bad teachers. It's we can't afford to retain the ones that we need to.
Man.
And the infrastructure of the schools. I mean, we have kids going to school right now that are going to school in crumbling buildings with water they can't drink. It is absolute insanity in some ways. And I know this comes from a whatever kind of place. I'm really glad that my children are no longer in school here, because I can't say the quality of education they would receive now compared to even just a couple years ago, and then 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And you speak to the speak of just real quick to speaking to the aging infrastructure, because I went to middle school and high school in District 11, and Doherty, where I graduated, is now over twice as old as it was when I was there, and so
boo hiss, sorry.
Yeah. And so it's like the cost of infrastructure and upgrading and maintenance and stuff just increases dramatically as you don't fund it.
Yep.
Anyway,
sorry,
Rob.
Nick, we're a Palmer family.
Well, that's not my fault.
So we have to. We can't really be friends.
All right. It's okay.
I mean, you bring up like an interesting point though too, which obviously my primary concerns would be the constituents in my particular district.
Yes.
And I'm acknowledging that. I mean, I've talked about that a lot, over the last 6 months. At the same time, there is something fundamentally wrong with the quality of the facility and the quality of the education that one receives.
Yes.
Being dependent on where you live geographically.
With the property taxes.
In a city that like Colorado Springs. We're not talking about a comparison between California and Colorado. We're talking about districts that are neighboring each other in the city.
Yeah.
And that is so strange to me. I mean, that seems like a big failure to me that we would have those kind of equity issues within a city like Colorado Springs.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. It's you hear people that are moving into the Springs specifically to go to your district, that are finding, and I'm not advocating for this. However, if necessary, finding people that live in your area so they can use that address and send their children to a school that is not falling apart around them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is absolute insanity. It is insanity.
Yeah, and the difference between, I mean, you've got District 20 right in your wheel well there, but then compare that to Harrison District 2
Oh
and
yeah.
even in District 11, and just like one district's got regular lacrosse teams and the other one is like, how are our buildings falling apart? And you're
Yeah.
right, it's creating that stark contrast. Is there something that
Hmm.
can be done at a state to be like, especially with the partial repeal of Gallagher on property taxes, to like equalize these districts across the state instead of wherever they have enough money to get mill levy overrides to pay for things that they desperately need? Because we've shot down a number of those overrides in the past couple years.
Hmm.
Or they just don't get put on the ballot either, which is something that we've experienced recently up here.
Hmm.
Which is still kind of like blows my mind too. You know, of in a state where they deliberately designed some things to allow the voters to vote on tax increases and that kind of stuff, and then they just don't let us vote on it either. But
At
that's
all.
I guess that's another issue.
Yeah.
There are the formulas that are used for determining how much state funding goes to what school districts and the level that's the level of that, because of the way that the formulas are designed and some of the elements that are considered, like as an example, you know, the amount of property taxes that are paid within like certain districts because of the differences in the types of homes and that kind of stuff. There are some adjustments, and there have been a lot of people who've been calling for adjustments for that for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways of like making adjustments to how the state funding is distributed.
Absolutely. Well, I'm hopeful that we're able to triangulate that better so that we aren't having to have individual districts like, please give us an extra 5 mils or whatever so that we can replace these, add air conditioning to these 60-year-old buildings. Otherwise, the students are going to freaking not learn. And then, of course, you go on Facebook, unfortunately. And you're like, well, I grew up and I had, it was 120 degrees in my classroom and I learned so much.
Yeah, not a thing.
I had
Absolutely not.
no issues whatsoever. I don't know what kids are whining about these days.
Well, let's see. Can we talk about climate change and the fact that Colorado is probably, many degrees hotter now in the spring and early summer than it was years ago when I was in school?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
When I was growing up here and didn't have to have a fan in a window or an air conditioner, living in an actual full-size freaking house in the summertime because it wasn't that hot.
Yeah, Colorado homes didn't have AC.
Colorado homes still don't have AC.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Yeah. Rob's wandering off screen.
No, I went and grabbed coffee.
Oh, great. Yeah.
That's okay. That's actually, whenever I was dealing with dog stuff, that's actually what I did, is get some more coffee.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do want to ask, and this is something I've been asking the previous candidates as well, is that you and Alvin and Ryan and that are putting a lot of effort into branding and putting yourselves out there and making yourselves visible. Like you are a presence here. And a problem that we've had.
You're going to ask the question I wanted to ask it.
Well, you're too busy whatever you're doing. So I'm being a host.
His mind.
Yeah, that's what he does. but the thing is, in Colorado Springs particular, where we haven't had a reliable, left-leaning candidates, you get these candidates that come in, they get really excited, they think, oh man, all those unaffiliated voters are probably going to go to me, the numbers are looking good, I'm getting all this support, all this money's getting spent, the number comes, they're in a plus 10, plus 20 R district, which, 14's not a friendly climate for someone who's like, I am a Democrat. So, and then they lose and then they disappear. They even flee the state. It's like, we need people who come back to this over and over again. So, Rob, what happens in elections? Say you don't win, what happens?
I'm going to continue doing the same thing that I am for a long time. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. You know, I'm not going to be moving, you know, anywhere. I mean, I understood. I mean, I'm not naive. I think that that I have really good chances of winning, to be completely honest.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
I'm not naive to the fact that, you know, that there it is a heavily Republican district as well.
Yep, they have a fight
And
on your hands to do it. But
say it again.
saying that not naive to the fact that you have a fight on your hands to
Yeah, no,
to accomplish this. But you know, I've seen everyone that we've talked to so far. Everyone is willing to put in the fight, and then even if something happens and they're not fighting at the level they want to, will be continuing to fight, even I mean at whatever level they're at. You know, going to the school board meetings and disrupting and being like, okay, y'all are just ridiculous and we can't do this anymore, kind
Working
of stuff.
behind the scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's probably. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's going to be the same thing that I have been doing. I've been fighting. It's some level for something for a decade.
Yeah.
And so that's what I said before. I mean, like the political side of this is newer for me, but the activism side is not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I have every intention. I didn't realize like how much the foundational aspects of running for office were.
Mm-hmm.
Because I haven't done this like part before.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I had kind of a foundation. I'd been building a community of parents, specifically, you know, who were in this area, who were like already activated, who were already ready, you know, to have their attention focused, you know, on something like what I'm trying to do here. So that definitely helped, and it gave me a leg up compared to you know some of the other like first time candidates. But I've already recognized, and my wife and I have even talked about this too. And fortunately, she like 100% like agrees with me, because this wouldn't work if, you know, like my family like wasn't on board.
Yeah.
But
I'm doing this like, alone.
you have to continue doing this. You have to continue maintaining the momentum. Like even if I didn't win, that doesn't mean that my TikTok, you know, account, you know, is going to go dark. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to still be engaging with people on social media in some level to continue building that foundation. It's not going to mean that I'm not going to continue going to events. I'm not going to continue speaking at school board meetings. All of that stuff, none of that changes. Actually, none of that changes regardless of whether I win or lose. My TikTok video that's gotten like the most views, and it's a couple million people have like seen this. I was speaking at a school board meeting, and I told the ASD 20 board that I quoted the Jackson 5, and I will always be there. I'm always going to be there holding them accountable. I'm always going to be holding my elected officials accountable. And I expect the same thing. I mean, if I'm elected, I expect the same thing from other people too, to hold me accountable for the things that I do. So
Town halls.
I'm trying to be an example of what it means to be an engaged citizen. And is it hard and does it take work? Yeah. But in our current climate, with the risks to our democracy that we're currently facing, this is what it takes.
That's a good answer. And do you run in 2024?
Regardless of the outcome, yes.
Okay. I think that's our first commitment to running again. And I realize that's early days, but it's good because, like I said, you've got the sweater Mr. Rogers thing going on. You can't just let that dissipate into the air, even if you're still going to be an activist. Like you can't lose that just because you lost one race. Like you can't do that. Now I'm going to say you are, but it's like,
yeah,
that's too precious, Rob. It's too good.
I know. Okay. So
yeah, go ahead.
Part of the thing that I do here, is I'm the research whatever person. So I am on your Ballotpedia, and I going through your connection, you know, candidate connection survey thing.
Yep.
And I'm looking, and I was the question that they ask about the book, essay, film, or something else you could recommend to someone who wants to understand your political philosophy. When I saw what you gave as your answer is this is a poem that I thought more people knew about, but then over the years finding out that nobody knows what I'm talking about when I bring up this poem is amazing. So the poem, I'll let you talk about it.
Just that, like, why I like referenced that.
Well, not only that, but the poem itself is because this is something that I found years and years and years ago that actually helped form some kind of the backbone almost of why I am an activist, why I am, that kind of thing. So I enjoy seeing that this is what it is.
If anybody wants to look it up, it's like listening, and it's to laugh often and much. A lot of people think that you'll see it being referenced as an Emerson poem, but it probably isn't the case.
Yes.
It's someone else, and I can't remember her name now.
Bessie Stanley.
Yeah, so someone else wrote it. Likely, I don't even know
Yes.
that's been like confirmed, but likely
It hasn't been.
Someone else wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the last line that I just, whenever I thought, I hadn't really thought about it in a political context before until I'm having to like think about it. And the last line is to know that one life has breathed easier because you have lived here. This is to have succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that summarizes public service and elected office so much.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, yeah.
You have to distill it down into like a couple of sentences. That is what it's all about. It's not about anything else other than to make sure that the people that you are representing breathe easier and that their lives are better. That's it. That's all. So I've thought about that a lot. I've thought about that a lot in the political context since then.
Yeah, like I said, it's and again, it may be it may be because we are, again, from the same, the same age group, the same, we're some Gen X babies. And I think that seeing, because again, I found this a really long time ago, and that was something that absolutely spoke to me as this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we're supposed to be on this planet. And so again, seeing it might just be a me thing. I may be the only person to ever tell you how much it means to me to know that this specific set of words is something that you look at and take your inspiration from. Because it's
supposed to make me cry. No, it's supposed to make me cry on a.
Well, that's what we do here.
I haven't made anybody cry yet.
We are working on it. We are really developing a really good packet for emotional.
Okay, so if anyone wants to look up the poem, it's really short. It's not a big, epic anything. And it you will find it online, reference to Ralph Waldo Emerson, and is just called To Laugh Often and Much. And it is, it's I'm not going to read the whole thing because I absolutely will cry. We don't need to see, I'm a hot mess today as it is. We don't need to make this any worse. But I highly recommend you look it up. I highly recommend that you read it and read it as Rob was saying in the spirit of political thinking. And it takes on a whole new okay, I'm done now.
Okay. Well, Emily, did you have other questions for Rob while we've got him here? Doritos. What do you think about Doritos, Rob? What's your hot take? Cooler Ranch or nacho cheesier?
I like there's like some flavor I picked up like in a truck stop or like something. They're spicy and I don't remember what they're called, but I like spicy stuff. So
Probably like the salsa verde ones or something.
give me Takis.
Oh man, yeah, you got to have those. Well, Rob, was there anything that we didn't touch on that you like messaging, or is there something that you wanted to express that maybe in other more or less casual interviews that you haven't been able to express yet as a person, as a candidate, or just as a resident of the north side of Colorado Springs?
This is your space to say whatever you want to say.
Your soapbox.
I mean, I suppose, I mean, I've repeated this. I mean, I'm kind of like casual, like to begin with, you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
we know.
I'm not gonna, I'm kind of talking to you guys the way that I've like talked to like everybody else, you know, but I think that is exactly like where I'm going with what I'm about to say is the elected officials are not these people that are like up on these pedestals, you know, up on Mount Olympus, you know, being awaited to be, you know, like called down. We're all just like people. And the person who's running for office needs to remember that, but the general public needs to remember that too. We're just people. And the role of a politician, the role of an elected official is not to impose their will. This is something I think that a lot of people get wrong. And I think that politicians, I think that the view of politics is even wrong. It is not to impose your will. It is to listen to people and then do things that is going to help them and it is in their best interest. Okay, so and this is where, you know, I start to have like a few arguments with some people, you know, like more on the left, right? Because I have to represent everybody. I mean,
Right.
This is part of like my taglines too, right? And I don't care if there's an RD, L, or G beside your name. Everybody deserves adequate representation. They just do. It doesn't, the political affiliation like does not matter in that case. And that means that I have to make compromises with the things that I believe as a person, with what my worldview tells me. I have to make compromises based on what I hear from people who may have different political leanings. That's the way it's supposed to work. There's nothing wrong with me as a Democrat doing that, listening to Republicans and having to figure out, okay, how do I incorporate what they are saying that they want into my worldview? Now, what I won't compromise on, I will not compromise human rights, because we shouldn't even be debating that in the first place.
No, we should not.
Right.
There are some things that we just shouldn't even be talking about. And I think that we should probably just stop talking about them. It doesn't matter. You know, that there are some fundamental things that are just there. People already know about me. I'm not compromising human rights. The end. We can move on to something else, and I'm going to do the best. I'm going to be the best representative you've ever seen. We're not talking about that. And that is the way that we have to all start thinking. It is not. We're all living together in this massive, complicated, diverse society. We cannot be so myopic to think that only our way is the right way, and that we have to like be going like in this direction. You know, we have to stop thinking about things as opposing views and start thinking about them as diverse views. Start to become more productive, like as a society, because we're all going to live or die on this big rock, you know, rotating, going around the sun. And we have to start figuring out ways of setting aside and even stop characterizing them as differences. We just have the viewpoints, you know, different ways of approaching like similar types of problems. We have to stop focusing so much on the fringes, and we have to start focusing on the middle.
Yeah, well,
that's the kind of representative that I'm going to be.
Yeah, I love to hear that, because it's become so many elected officials are sitting up there, and first and foremost, seems to have forgotten that elected officials work for the people. The people don't work for the elected official. And also, being an elected official does not mean that you only work for your party.
Right.
you
or
know,
who voted for you.
yes, you're not being elected to be the representative of just the Democratic people in your area, and the Republicans are just left out to dry. And we really have got to start getting back to the understanding that regardless of who voted you in, you are responsible for every single person in your district. That is, that's the job. That's the job. You're not just.
I've said that so many times. That's literally the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a representative. Now, what
Yep.
I will ask you, that all sounds great and perfect, is to have positions where you are not going to compromise, and then be able to listen to people and hear other points of view. But a theme that's been going through this discussion that we've had is people who regularly vote against their best interest and are going to hold firm. And then, as you, Rob, have pointed out, is you then have these even more reactionary people who are like, we're not going to stop until we've conquered the 7 mountains of society, and turn this into a Christian nationalist thing. We are not going to, and you can't really compromise with that either, because then you are literally just stuck in the mud, not accomplishing that. So how do you reconcile when things can't really be reconciled or compromised?
I mean, authoritarianism fits into how I'm not compromising human rights.
Good. Yeah.
That there's the simple answer to that, and that's I mean, in spite of the religious connections, Christian nationalism that even shows up in the title, the connection to politics that Seven Mountains has.
Mm-hmm.
It all ultimately is theocratic authoritarianism. That is a segment of the population that sees that, and I'm speaking about white people and I'm speaking about Christians. Both of those demographics are shrinking, and they see that. I mean, a lot of this is like a fear reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a smaller group, a smaller segment of the population who is attempting to maintain control over the rest of the population, and that falls into I'm not compromising human rights.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, and I've talked about this some as well in some of my other platforms, we have whenever we're encountering these things, and this is kind of like a general statement here, we have to realize that we have to make sure that we're holding the right people responsible. The general people, I mean the people that we'll look down our noses at,
Mm-hmm.
that are repeating these things that they say that they believe. It's not necessarily their fault that they believe those things.
Right. I agree.
You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of gaslighting, a lot of manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of lies, that are that have been happening for 40 or 50 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That have led to this. So it isn't their fault. And a lot of it whenever we are all talking with people from those particular parts of the population, we have to remember our tone, and we have to remember the circumstances that we find ourselves in and how we got here. I mean, I've been going back and watching a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Mm-hmm.
and Cosmos, specifically, because he has such a good way of explaining very complex topics.
Mm-hmm.
But his tone is also, I try to match it, because you have to deliberately do that. And I'm sure that he deliberately does it too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where he has a calming tone, and he has a respectful tone, and he has a fun tone.
Mm-hmm.
He makes it fun and interesting to have a conversation with him, even though he's talking about very complex things. That's something that we all need to learn how to do. So while all of us have this, Emily, you talked about the ragey,
Yes.
the rage. We can't live in that space all the time.
No, we
It's
can't.
exhausting.
It's exhausting, number one, and
Yep.
it's only going to do so much. Number two, we have to learn also how to turn the ragey off and turn on Neil deGrasse Tyson.
You save your rage for Twitter. That's where it goes.
No, it goes on TikTok.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha. Well, Rob, I really...
Or you can save it for the Women's March anniversary.
There you
Yes.
go.
next Saturday.
Yeah, next Saturday. That's I actually I will be speaking.
I will
I
too.
was invited by Jennifer to speak simply because and I don't normally talk about like actually my real job. But I run a nonprofit for transgender and gender expansive adults. And so I will be speaking about the role that being transgender and gender expansive still plays within the women's rights movement.
And that's a good opportunity to thank you for something too, because you and I met at a rally downtown, and I got your card. I'm looking at your card on my desk like right now.
It's so it's so glitzy and
there's a lot of bling.
there's
Yes.
But I had it on my desk, and I won't reveal any identifying information, but I became aware of someone who recently came out publicly as transgender and was starting the process of transition, and was having some difficulties with finding friends and being part of the community. And I'm sitting here I was looking at Emily's card whenever I found out about that, and was able to get them in touch with you.
Yay.
Oh,
That makes me so happy. That makes me so happy. Yeah, because actually on the 8th we have my nonprofit has its own event that's going on. So I will be running around like a crazy person on the 8th, going and getting our event set up, and then coming back downtown to speak at the march, and then going back to the event. Because when we planned our events, we didn't realize that this was going on the same day.
There's some scheduling that we all need to figure out as a town. Anyway, maybe Rob, you can introduce some sort of state calendar, and everyone can just like
calendar.
You have to drive to Denver. You have to provide a particular kind of thumbtack, and it's a giant cork board. And everyone's got to put it on there.
That feels like a lot.
It does. It is a lot. Speaking of a lot, Rob, thank you so much for being able to chat with us today. I know scheduling is what it is. This is a very I've heard it's a busy part of this season ahead of this thing that's happening.
This exercise
this
of whole election
democracy,
thing.
This whole election thing. So thank you so much for being able to talk to us candidly. I know you speak candidly to everyone anyway, but to talk to us about who you are and how you're really going to affect, and for the better, the people of Colorado Springs, especially on the north end, where I think we kind of like fuck those guys sometimes.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm of that, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm downtown even before I got downtown.
Yeah. Not the people who live up there, but the developers who are taking advantage of the people who are living up there.
Yep. Yeah, and just, the sprawl.
Absolutely. So, thank you, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, great interview. I'm glad he was able to sit down and that as we get closer to election, obviously this is just gonna get harder and harder. Candidates are doing things in advance of this time in which people
very
decide
busy.
Whether they are going to get a job or not.
Mm-hmm. Like, very busy.
Can you imagine any other job where you have to work so hard to
get one?
a job? Maybe get one. Exactly. Actually, I think with the number of people I see who are like, I did 700 job applications and didn't get a job. I remember during the peak of the pandemic, early on, 2.5 years ago, I was applying to Come and Go and stuff like that. And it was just absurd. Not getting anything at all. So.
Yep.
Woo. All right. Emily, you want to get us out of here?
Absolutely, Nick. We are badly needed and long overdue. We are a podcast about shaking things up in a conservative city. This show is hosted by Nick Raven and Emily Lewis, which is me.
Yes,
you can watch the video version of this show on YouTube and listen to us in podcast form everywhere you find podcasts when Nick remembers to download that.
Upload.
You do it I do it every time. Yeah. Anyway. When Nick remembers to put them on the podcasty things that people find podcasts.
Yeah, then you can hear them.
Yes, you can listen to them. But I highly suggest watching us. We're kind of ridiculous.
Whatever works for you.
So our theme music is by the Knockblockers, our local ska band. Super awesome. They are playing live in some places throughout the end of the year. Definitely recommend you go and follow them on social media and see if you can catch a live show. You can reach us on all the social media platforms. So on Instagram, we are Badly Needed Podcasts. On Twitter, we are at Badly Needed COS. On Facebook at Badly Needed and Long Overdue Podcast. And on TikTok, which has become Nick's favorite place to be.
100%.
We are BNLO Podcast.
Excellent. Emily, thank you so much. We are badly needed and long overdue, and we're going to catch you next time. We will.
We will.
We're going to catch you. We got a net. We're going to get it. We're going to get you good. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Woo.